Welcome to the second episode here. The pieces are on the board. Now it's time for strategy. On the first day of the campaign, nearly 500,000 soldiers march forward in immense columns. Among them are voices speaking not only French but also Italian, German, Polish, Portuguese, and Spanish. This vast force is known as the Army of 20 Nations, a symbol of Napoleon's empire advancing toward its destiny. Napoleon envisions a swift, decisive war, a demonstration of overwhelming power that will bring the Tsar back to the negotiation table. He dreams of uniting all these people, all the peoples of Europe, under one rule. Soldiers are promised a rapid victory and a quick return home. But beyond the Niemen River, which marks the border between Poland and the Russian Empire, lies uncertainty and the unknown. The Grand Armée is the largest army Europe has ever seen, a staggering feat in size and scale. One distinctive feature of this force is the large number of civilians accompanying it. Officers and sometimes even non-commissioned officers bring along with them their wives, their children, or mistresses. This creates a heterogeneous and occasionally chaotic appearance among the ranks, and so you have this huge crowd of people following along. So this makes it even bigger than just having the soldiers and the army. And just picture the amount of supplies, the horses, the cannons, the weapons that these people aim to carry with them. Among the soldiers are those who have been with Napoleon since his earliest campaigns. These are the grenadiers of the Old Guard, the elite veterans who formed the foundation of the Grand Armée. Many have followed Napoleon since the Egyptian campaign. And they just don't see Napoleon as their leader. He's a genius. And that loyalty to him is unwavering. They follow the character. They like his personality. They have trust in him. Napoleon is both surprised and concerned by the lack of resistance as his army crosses the Niemen River. And, well, he wonders, where is the Russian army? However, in a letter to his wife, the Empress, he reveals none of his worries. My dear friend, nothing significant has happened, and I am well, but the heat is excessive. For Napoleon, the main obstacle to establishing French supremacy in Europe is England. His goal is to force Britain into submission and make peace. In 1807, he formed an alliance with Russia, but it was an unequal one. The treaty required Russia to declare war on England and stop all trade with the British. However, Russia's economy relied on trade with Britain, making it impossible for them to fully comply with this part of the agreement. Napoleon also had an ideological motive for the invasion. He saw this war against Russia as a way for European civilization to stand against what he viewed as Asiatic barbarism. On the other hand, the Russians believed Napoleon's true intentions was to conquer their country. Of course, Napoleon hopes for a quick victory, and he believes he can defeat the Russian army in 2 months and force Tsar Alexander to sign a peace treaty on his terms. However, Napoleon does not intend to destroy the Russian Empire or remove Alexander from the throne. His goal is a limited war, not a full conquest. For Alexander, the true enemy to defeat is Napoleon, not France itself. He has a deep admiration for French culture and history, to the point where he speaks French among almost as much as Russian. It's the language of the elites. But here we have another dramatization reflecting the tensions and dynamics between the Tsar Alexander and his generals during the first movements of Napoleon's army. One morning, a general approaches the Tsar and saying, "Sire, the Grand Armée has crossed the Niemen River." And Alexander responds, "Without a declaration of war, that's impossible." The general goes on and explains, 2 days ago, the new French ambassador sent a note saying his mission has ended. Alexander asks, 2 days ago, why wasn't I informed? The general hesitates. Well, we didn't think that. Alexander cuts him off and says, was that their declaration of war? The general insists that they are ready to fight, but Alexander disagrees, saying, Bonaparte wants a short war, one of those victories that made him famous. He wants another Austerlitz. Why give him that pleasure? The general protests, refusing to engage. That's not honorable. Alexander replies, let him get lost, and let's buy some time. That clearly states their strategy. Alexander I is a complex man. On one hand, he is a determined politician. On the other, he is sensitive and doesn't feel inferior to Napoleon. During the 1805 campaign, Alexander had taken personal command of the Russian army, but it ended in disaster at the Battle of Austerlitz. He knows his own military skills are lacking. For the first time in Russian history, in 1812, he decides not to take direct command of the army. The defeat at Austerlitz had taught him a harsh lesson. Napoleon had tricked him into thinking he had only 40,000 soldiers, when in reality he had twice as many. Trapped and humiliated, Alexander and his Austrian ally left 16,000 dead on the battlefield. The disaster at Austerlitz marked the start for a long series of victories for the Grand Armée, leading up to its march into Russia 7 years later. To pressure Tsar Alexander, French spies spread leaflets in Russian villages to create confusion. The leaflets read, Emperor Napoleon is not your enemy. Help him overthrow the elites who oppress you. Freedom awaits you, along with a better life. 30 million Russian peasants, they're known as the mujiks, lived in conditions similar to slavery. The smallest act of disobedience to the nobility was brutally punished. Of course, they were serfs. And surely they must long for freedom. Napoleon promised to end serfdom, hoping to win their support, the support of the people. So if they could revolt against the nobility and the Tsar, he would have an easier time defeating Russia. But despite their hardship, the peasants were deeply attached to the land they worked. It was their world, and they knew nothing of the French forces moving toward them. For both Napoleon and Alexander, it was impossible to predict how the peasants would react. Russia was a vast and uncertain land. For 3 centuries, Russian territory had been spared from invasion, so the people saw Napoleon's approach as an attack, just as brutal as the invasions their ancestors had suffered from the Tartars or the Mongols. Tsar Alexander needed many soldiers to fight Napoleon, and whom he had depicted as the Antichrist. And so therefore, young mujiks were conscripted into the army with the approval of their landowners, who saw it as their duty to defend Holy Mother Russia. These young recruits were enlisted for 25 years, after which they would be considered free men, if, of course, they survived. For the mujiks, joining the army meant they would probably never return to their families. The life of a soldier was incredibly harsh, and the regiment became their new family. This deep bond helped explain the bravery with which they fought. Soldiers fought not just for Russia, but for their comrades, their new family. The Russian nobility, however, feared Napoleon's promise to end serfdom in Russia. They worried that it would lead to chaos and the collapse of their social order. It was a direct affront to their interest as nobility, as a ruling class. As Napoleon's Grand Armée crossed into Russian territory, the campaign seemed destined for a swift and decisive victory. Yet, the Russians refused to give him the grand battle, and he sought, retreating deeper into their vast homeland. With each step, the French soldiers encountered more challenges: vanishing supplies, relentless rain, and an enemy that seemed to disappear into the mist. Well, in our next episode, we'll see how this campaign, initially marked by optimism and momentum, begins to reveal its true cost, from the burning city on Smolensk to the mounting hardships of war. The invasion of Russia grows more desperate and more destructive. So that's it for today's episode. I'll see you next time in episode 3. Bye.